When I was walking up to the chapel, I just felt grateful that actually I could walk up the stairs and nothing was hurting. Not my knee, not my hip, getting stronger. So there's always something to be grateful about. And I'm happy to see everyone. And I hope that you're all having a good summer. It's been kind of a weird summer, a bit of a wet summer, but I think our lawns are enjoying this summer. And if you have a lawn and you water your lawn, you're probably really enjoying this summer because you don't have to spend any money on water to water your lawn. So anyway, always something to be grateful for. So today the topic of my sermon is on hearing and listening. So earlier in the week, I heard a few quotes that kind of started to send me in this topic. One was a Sufi, which is a branch of Islam, a Sufi saying, which is, if speaking is silver, then listening is gold. And then another Persian poet, Rumi, who was from the 13th century, wrote, since in order to speak, one must first listen, learn to speak by listening. So I felt judged and inspired and very thoughtful from those two quotes. And I think the conversation about hearing and listening is something that's not new to our community. A couple of years ago we had the Project Phoenix conference here, and then we followed that up with the Relationship Awareness Evening. And we talked about the different ways of listening. I don't know if anybody remembers, but there's the ignoring listening. That's when you're driving in the car with your kids and you're talking to them and they're texting. That's the ignore. Or, that kind of You're not really paying any attention. That's ignoring listening. Anybody here guilty of that? No, nobody here. Another kind of listening they call fake listening, which is the kind of listening where you're not actually listening to what the person's saying, you're just figuring out what you're going to say next and how you're going to make your point. And then maybe the most, I don't know if destructive is the right word, but not helpful form of listening is when you're listening and you're just preparing to give unsolicited advice to someone. So you're thinking about everything that you want to correct them or tell them what they should think or what's wrong or whatever, so you're not truly listening. And so I think, that kind of conversation has been happening in our community, and we're all in different ways maybe thinking about it. And then, so I thought, okay, well, I'm kind of chewing on this topic. I checked out YouTube. It's very interesting on YouTube to find out about how you hear, because hearing is a sense. It's involuntary. Sound waves come into your outer ear, hit the bones in your inner ear. This is very simple. And then go into the cochlea, I think that's how you say it, where there's cochlea, where mysteriously sound waves get turned into electrical waves that then go to your brain, and you can hear. So hearing is, you can't not hear, right? You can't not hear, but you can not listen. And I think we've all experienced that in our relationships. And then Dr. Yang spoke on Friday. I'm thinking about this sermon. I'm really thinking about this sermon on Thursday. And then on Friday, Dr. Yang spoke exactly to this kind of point. In the youth ministry portion of morning devotion. And he was really expressing Father's heart, parental heart of listening. That was what he was saying, listen with a parental heart. And he said that when you go to witness to people, he was talking specifically in this context about witnessing. When you go to witness to someone, don't just go proclaiming true parents or here's the autobiography or, he describes really beautifully to cry, weep when they weep and laugh when they laugh, and really to, receive their heart. And So that was like, okay, Heavenly Parent, I guess this is what you want me to, it was like affirmation that I was on the right track. And I looked in the Bible, and there's a passage in Psalms, if we can get that passage, that this describes, let me just read it. I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my pleas for mercy. Because he inclined his ear to me, therefore I will call on him as long as I live. So the word incline, it's not a word that we normally use, but the definition of it is to listen intently, attentively, and receptively. So when you tend to think in the Old Testament of God, it's often a more masculine expression of God. God is bringing forth his word, or God is bringing down judgment. But here, this is a very tender and sensitive God that we're seeing. And then the psalmist said, because, Lord, how you listen to me, I want to talk to you I'm going to talk to you for the rest of my life. So if we think about ourselves in relationship to others, and in relationship to witnessing, or to our children or our friends, don't we want to be that kind of person that people will want to call on for the rest of their life? So learning to listen is a skill that we need to practice. It's not automatic like hearing is. We can practice it in conversations, in meetings, in visiting people. We have to have the intention to listen with love and heart and respect. Now we're speaking about language, and I'm going to shift a little here, that music is often thought of as a kind of language. That music is the language of the heart. Has anyone heard that? And that who here doesn't like to listen to music? Everybody. Now, if I were to ask what kind of music, then we might have a little bit of disagreements. But somehow the human being is just wired towards listening to music, right? And it's very interesting. They've done like brain scans of the difference between a normal person like me listening to music, and musicians like Eric and Sebastian and Jim listening to music, that actually the music activates a different part of their brain. It's because they've trained themselves. So they've trained themselves both to play and also, they have to be able to hear, like, whoops, right? Oops, I just went off. So it's very, very interesting. And there's an aspect of music called improvisation. Who knows what improvisation is besides Sebastian? Okay, so to improvise means to create something spontaneously without preparation. So for centuries, musicians have heard a little theme. You find these things called variations on a theme, where in the olden days when there was no internet or no TV, and the only way people could entertain themselves was they had to entertain each other. So someone might hum a tune, and a really good pianist would take that tune, maybe having heard it for the first time, and go off on it and create all kinds of interesting sounds and music. And this form of improvisation is especially, and nowadays, you don't find it so much in classical music, I think. Probably somebody could correct me, but mostly, where do you find, when nowadays, if you hear the word improvisation and music, what kind of music do you tend to think about? Jazz, right, exactly, jazz. So jazz is a type of music where the musicians all kind of, the word is riff, right? They kind of play off of each other, and they interact with one another as they play. Classical music, you have the conductor, but in jazz, the conductor might move around according to who's taking a lead. And I want to share something. I want to share about a relationship between two jazz musicians today. And Dr. Yang spoke to us about having a parental heart. And I think in this example, we're going to hear a testimony of one musician speaking about the other. You can see how the parental heart, the power of the parental heart on the younger person. The pioneer of jazz music was a trumpeter called Miles Davis. Who here knows of Miles Davis? Sebastian told me they sometimes just put on Miles Davis and listen to it and enjoy it in their house. So Miles Davis was born in the 20s. He was classically trained. He went to Juilliard, but he has transitioned into a kind of more experimental form of music, which was kind of the beginnings of jazz. There was someone, and he had I think it's a quintet. Is that a quintet 5? They had a bass player, you know, like the big bass, a saxophonist, a pianist, a trumpeter, and a drummer. And a young musician was invited to join that as a pianist, and his name is Herbie Hancock. For those of you that are familiar with jazz, you know these people. Herbie Hancock was a child prodigy as a kid. He played piano with the Chicago Symphony at age 11. He also went to Juilliard and studied classical music, but kind of, I don't know what the word is, maybe not, it's not graduated out, but just moved into in a different direction. And he had an opportunity to play with Miles Davis. And we're gonna watch a testimony that he shared about, not yet, I will share the quote, about playing with Miles Davis. And one thing that Miles Davis said that is so interesting is, you can put that quote up. He said, this is kind of to set this up. It's not the note you play that's the wrong note. It's the note you play afterwards that makes it right or wrong. So, it's not the note you play that it's the wrong note. It's the note you play afterwards that makes it right or wrong. So let's watch this little clip from Herbie Hancock speaking about Miles Davis. This is a young, Herbie Hancock is now in his 70s.
And I remember that we were playing So What? One of Miles's compositions from the late 50s, I guess. And Tony Williams was playing drums, Ron Carter bass, Wayne Shorter saxophone, and it was a really hot night. The music was tight, it was powerful, it was innovative, and fun. We were having a lot of fun, and the music was on. Tony Williams was burning on his drums, and so right in the middle of Miles's solo, when he was playing one of his amazing solos, and I'm trying, I'm in there and I'm playing, right in the middle of his solo, I played the wrong chord, a chord that it just sounded completely wrong. It sounded like a big mistake. And I did this and I went, oh, like this. And I put my hands around my ears. And Miles paused for a second. And then he played some notes that made my chord right. He made it correct. Which astounded me. I couldn't believe what I heard. Miles was able to make something that was wrong into something that was right, with the power of the choice of notes that he made and the feeling that he had. And so I couldn't play for about a minute. I couldn't even touch the piano. But what I realize now is that Miles didn't hear it as a mistake. he heard it as something that happened, just an event. And so that was part of the reality of what was happening at that moment. And he dealt with it. He found something that, since he didn't hear it as a mistake, he felt it was his responsibility to find something that fit. And he was able to do that. That taught me a very big lesson about not only music, but about life. You know, we can look for the world to be as we would like it to be as individuals, you know, make it easy for me, that idea. We can look for that. But I think the important thing is that we grow. And the only way we can grow is to have a mind that's open enough to be able to accept situations, to be able to experience situations as they are and turn them into medicine, turn poison into medicine. Take whatever situation you have and make something constructive happen with it. That's what I learned from that situation with Miles.
All right, so he said Miles could take something wrong and make it right. I'm sure that he heard that the wrong chord was being played. What Miles Davis didn't do is he didn't stop and say, "What's wrong with you?" He didn't stop and try to correct him. He didn't judge him. He didn't humiliate him, you know, as this young guy in front of the audience. He didn't ignore the mistake and just keep playing as if it didn't happen, which is, I think, normally what people will do. He paused, and then he made something. He took that one chord that had been not where it was supposed to be, and he riffed off of it. He developed something off of it. Herbie Hancock said, he listened, and then through the power of the note and the feeling that he had, he took the music in a new direction. True listening enables us to pause and to pivot. So think pause and pivot. Often we think, I have the truth and I'm going to correct you so that you can know the truth and I'm going to show it to you. Doesn't always work. In this situation, he said he took poison, because it was like he poisoned that song, and he turned it into medicine. He turned it into something beautiful and healing. I got my pages mixed up here. So he said that also Miles didn't hear it as a mistake. This is very interesting. He heard it as something that happened, as an event, and he dealt with it. And since he didn't hear it as a mistake, he felt then, okay, so he played this chord, now it's my responsibility to take it somewhere. So it's my responsibility to find something how it could fit. And then when he spoke about we can look at the world as we would like it to be. You know, we can look at it as we want it to be, that he said something to make it easy for me. If everybody is like me, if everybody thinks like me, that makes it easy for me. But we have to grow. And then this is what was really interesting, because he started to say, if we have a mind that's open enough to accept, and then he stopped. He didn't say to accept anyone and anything. He stopped, because he kind of knew, well, that's not actually maybe correct. He said, if we have a mind to experience situations as they are, then we can turn them into medicine. We can take poison and turn it into medicine. And that he said, what I learned from Miles Davis is that I can take any situation and make something constructive with it. And when I ran across this little clip, and I thought about parental heart in action. Because it's, in a conversation, you can determine yourself, okay, I'm going to sit, I'm going to listen well, I'm going to not interrupt, But when you're in motion and you're doing something and somebody plays a wrong chord, isn't it easy to kind of react and want to correct and it's not easy to go, oh, okay, let me see what I can do with this. So I felt that in this story, Miles Davis had an incredible, to use our language, parental heart. He turned poison into medicine. So if you think about it, if Miles had done something different, then forever Herbie's mistake would have been a mistake. It would have been just a source of so much embarrassment to him. So if we think about ourselves and our relationships with each other and our relationships with people in general, when we're able to be fully present in the way that Miles was present to the actual moment, but we can be present to another person, to their struggles, their pain, and even their mistakes, then we're being supportive. And that being supportive then creates a connection. It creates a bond, and it creates trust. When you have those things, a bond and a trust and a connection with someone, you can say anything. You can disagree a lot, but you never violate. Because you've made that bond, then you can stay connected. And I think the difference to me in the age before the coming of heaven and the age after the coming of heaven, or not the difference, a difference, is that in the age before the coming of heaven, our focus was really proclaiming the truth, right? Taking communism head on. Restoration through indemnity had a certain formula that was irrevocable, unchangeable. But in the age after the coming of heaven, Father has told us this is a time to live according to the principle of creation. To live according to the principle of creation, not just simply talk the principle of creation. So I felt in that moment, the way Miles Davis interacted with the mistake that Herbie Hancock made, he was living subject-object relationship. And through that, the bond between the two of them grew. And if we, and this is an art form, and obviously Miles Davis was so trained in music, it was so much a part of him that he could take that chord that didn't belong there and do something. Somebody else maybe couldn't have done it. But I think if we train ourselves in the realm of the heart, then when we encounter something which is equivalent to a really awful chord, rather than stopping the music or seeking just to correct that person, we can pivot. We can pause and we can pivot and create a situation where they can grow and we can come closer together. If we deny someone's reality in life, then we're kind of setting ourselves up for two outcomes. One, we can sort of want to force them to reframe and change their reality to mine. This is what I think is right. This is what I think is appropriate. So we can do that, or you just have conflict. You just have conflict. And when we show up to one another in that way, it's actually very dehumanizing for the other person because we're negating their reality, their life experience. We're saying that it's not valid, it doesn't matter. So if we accept each other we can accept another person's reality, then we can learn and we can communicate. We don't have to agree, but there can be a kind of openness and vulnerability between the two of us. And in that space, everybody grows. You know, the idea of improvisation also exists on the stage. Right? Does you ever know about the improv? It's a theater. And there's, you can take a course in improvisation, and they'll put two people on a stage and say, give them a phrase or give them a context, or, you know, and then they have to play off of each other to usually to create something humorous. Because I think improvisation, not entirely? Oh, I thought Sebastian was shaking his head. But when I think of the improvisation, I usually think of humor. But they have to play off of each other. And I also listened to a guy who was sharing about when he would go into like an improv situation with something in his mind, like, oh, I want to do this or this or this. It never worked. He couldn't connect to his other the other person he was acting with, and it didn't work. But he said, kind of when I could empty myself and observe and listen and also check his own emotional state. Like be aware of where he was at. How is he feeling? Then he said this incredible bond came. And this is so interesting because this is in theater, and you kind of tend to think as theater is more liberal. But he said they have a word for when that kind of connection happens on stage, and it's called groupthink. Which I just don't really associate. Groupthink sounds like you're brainwashed or something, right? But they said the people are so connected in that way. And then he says it's such a delight. It's so much fun and so much joy comes from that kind of connection. So there's a Greek word gnosis, which means to empty oneself. It's kind of the idea of where grace comes in. You empty yourself and you can receive God's grace. There's a Sufi saying, another Sufi saying that is kind of similar to, for those who would seek their life must lose it, and it's, you have to die before you die. And then in Buddhism, there's kind of that idea of emptying oneself, not to just obliterate yourself, but to kind of let go of your ego so that something can come in and something new can develop. Jesus told us that the kingdom of heaven is within, right? Everybody's heard that. The kingdom of heaven is within. But I want to add something to it, which is the kingdom of heaven is between. The kingdom of heaven is between. It's in that relationship that's between two people. Another famous musician, Mozart, said that music is not in the notes, but in the silence between the notes. So, physics has taught us that there's not much matter. Everything is relationship, right? So, for us to live the principle in this time, I think it would behoove us and it would help us to be able to pause and pivot the way Miles Davis did. When we hear something that we don't agree with, or that we, rather than just reacting to it, and also not just listening passively and in your own mind thinking this person is so off, if they only, if they only knew what I knew, then they would be. But, how do you pause and pivot and create something that benefits both of you? So for me, this is a challenge of living the principle, how we can live the principle in this age after the coming of heaven. So can you please join me in prayer? Our loving Heavenly Parent, the whole universe is an expression of your heart and your love and your mind and your heart, your will. Things just resonate with beauty and harmony and work together in some kind of mysterious way. The harmony that exists in nature the balance that exists in nature, it just exists in some way. And I think we have something to learn from that, Heavenly Parent. When we look at a forest of trees, science has found the relation, there's all kind of communication going on between the trees, but there's no central tree. And an expression of I've been feeling, Heavenly Parent, that we understand in our life the value of the center point and the value of the vertical and the value of having a conductor in a symphony. And we're very accustomed to that mode. But for us to be relevant in the world today, I truly feel, Heavenly Parent, that we need to kind of develop a little bit of that improvisation, that jazz mentality. We need to be able to just experience where another person is at without evaluating. Because that kind of thing can be very crushing to people's spirit. I hope that today, from this beautiful example between these world-renowned musicians, that we can all learn something and gain something that we can put into practice in our life. Thank you, Heavenly Parent. I offer this report in the name of Hiromi and Catherine Ono, a blessed central family. Adieu.